Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 36th Psalm, and this psalm can be broken into three distinct turning points, the first of which is a description of the wicked in verses 1 through 5. Then what David does, rather than dwell excessively on the wicked, he turns his eyes upward to the antidote to wickedness, and he gives a hymn of the temple, which would have been thought of as the center of the divine presence on earth. And then that lasts from verses 6 through 10. Then 10 through 13, he concludes with a prayer for the justice, for the righteous, and the wicked to receive the fruits and deserts of their attitudes. And so the psalm actually begins with the title, "To the Chief Singer of David, Servant of Yahweh." So psalms, we read them as poetry, but they were originally lyrical poetry. They were meant to be sung in liturgical worship services. So this would have been to the chief singer. It would have been written by David, who considered himself a servant of Yahweh. Even though he was a king, he was submitted to the heavenly king, and he who is not submitted to a higher authority cannot be entrusted to execute or implement authority on earth. So the first verse reads, "Transgression speaks to the wicked within his heart. Fear of Elohim is not before his eyes." So the heart is it speaks to us. It is the center of our will, volition, and emotions, and it does have a voice of its own. Unfortunately, how the transgressor diagnoses his own heart is diametrically opposed to how Yahweh diagnoses it through his prophet Jeremiah. The human heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. Who can know it? So we learned three things. It's wicked, it's incomprehensible, and it's deceitful. So it makes us think that transgression or sin or evil or bad is good. And when we lack, and from a corrupt heart comes a defiled conscience and a confused mind, which leads to a perverted will, which describes much of the trajectory of what we read of in the first four verses. But with the absence of fear of Elohim, they do not fear the consequences of their sin. They're not. They have no sense of responsibility or accountability. So they think they can keep doing it and getting away with it because the fear is absent and missing. The righteous fear Elohim, and whereas the wicked do not. For he flatters himself in his own eyes to find his wickedness to be hated. So flattery is a means of self-deceit. When we flatter ourselves, when we flatter others, it is more often than not, it's usually less than genuine and sincere. It's a form of manipulation, not communication. We hurl and laud, praise, and plaudits on people, exaggerate and embellish the good things about them in order to curry favor with them. But there is such a thing as a self-deceptive flattery. So in his own eyes, he sees no wrong. He sees no need to repent, the transgressor, that is. And but his wickedness will be hated, even if he doesn't hate it. Wickedness, it brings injury, devastation, and ruin not only on the transgressor, but those all around them. So we are to hate sin with a white-hot passion in the ways that the habitual and chronic transgressor does not. They are in love with their sin. They are lost and they are loving it. They are ignorant of their lost doom and fallen condition. We have to know better. Then verse 3, "The words of his mouth are wickedness and deceit. He has ceased to be wise, to do good." So remember Jeremiah's diagnosis of the human heart, and it's from the heart where the words of the mouth spring and the meditations of the mind derive. So wickedness and deceit, desperately wicked and deceitful above all else. Who can understand it? And this indicates that this transgressor, this typecast transgressor, had at least at one point known the way of wisdom and walked in the way of wisdom, which is synonymous with the way of good and doing right. but for whatever reason they had repented of the path of wisdom and correctness and goodness, gone their own way, they're doing their own thing, they're lost and loving it and don't even care. He plots wickedness on his bed. He places himself in a way that is not good. He does not despise evil. So wicked people, they cannot get to sleep without plotting or scheming some evil action. This is the worst of the most wicked of the wicked. Similar descriptions abound in the first chapter of Proverbs and the second chapter of Micah. People who are so wicked that they are restless and can't get to sleep unless they have a plan or scheme or conspiracy to implement evil the very next day. That is their motivation for living. And if they don't have that in motion in their mind, they cannot get sleep. And, little do they know that they think they are placing themselves in a path that is good. To bring it back to Platonic Socratic philosophy, the evildoer it's an intellectual failure. The thief thinks he is doing good when he is stealing because he's bringing benefit to himself, but he's actually causing harm to others, and there's a bigger picture than the self. And he does not despise evil, but in fact loves it. He's in love with his sin, in love with himself, and we are to despise evil and sin and transgression with a white-hot passion once more. O Yahweh, your kindness is in the heavens, and your trustworthy reaches to the clouds. So actually misspoke earlier. The description of the wicked is the first 4 verses, not the first 5. So in verses 5 through 10, he focuses on the antidote to wickedness, the supremely, sovereignly good one, whose kindness is in the heavens. That's where he dwells. It is his abode, his creation. He is unfailingly and unceasingly kind and long-suffering with us in our sins, and his faithfulness and trustworthy reaches to the clouds. That's an understatement. It goes above and beyond the clouds, but he just uses physically relatable monumental objects in the next few verses as a reference point, but we have to understand that these are understatements, and Yahweh's attributes used in reference to these physical monumental things go above and beyond it. They are infinite, whereas these objects of his creation, the mountains, etc., have definite limits. Your righteousness is like the mountains. Your justice are a great deep. So a mountain is a source of strength, stability, and eternality. The ancients thought of mountains as a source of ancientness. They were always there before them. They pre-existed life, according to the ancients. But Yahweh's righteousness is like the mighty mountain. So there's a might to his righteousness. There is strength, and there are teeth behind his righteousness. He has the power to cast sinners into hell, or to exalt the humble into heaven. And that is a part of the strength of his righteousness. And his justice are like a great deep. So that would have been a water reference, a great deep. And this brings to mind the passage of Micah. He cast the iniquities of the repentant into the sea or abyss of forgetfulness. I forgot to read one more line. Oh, Yahweh, you save man and beast. So every item in creation is his effect. He is affectionately invested into every item in creation, and the evidence is that beast and animals will be with us in heaven. The lion shall lay down with the lamb, and the lamb shall not fare the lion. We read of in Isaiah and other places. So they are, in fact, saved, even though they are incapable of sin. Heaven, we can expect to see them there. Verses 7 through 10 would have been customarily sung by the Hebrew or Jewish people as a morning prayer to be recited in the morning. And so the 7th verse reads, "How precious is your kindness, O Elohim, and the sons of men take refuge in the shadow of your wings." So this quality of kindness is precious beyond measure or description. He's not asking it as a question. He's making it as a statement. This is mark of punctuation is an exclamation point, not a question at this. So he's in awe of how precious and how monumental his kindness is. And he acknowledges the fact that he is a source of solace, sanctuary, security, and shalom for those who take refuge in the shadow of his wings. He does not have literal wings, but we liken him with anthropomorphisms. He has no physical creatures, but we use familiar terms to approach and explain the unfamiliar. They are filled from the fatness of your house, and you give them drink from the river of your pleasure. So that his house would have been the temple, and remember, this is a temple hymn, and filled from the fatness, that would have been the sacrificial animals who were slaughtered on the altar. They would have fed the priest and those who were righteous enough to be in the temple. Of course, people going through the motions in the temple were the subject of many prophetic indictments. Isaiah 1, Hosea 6:6. There's just too many to list that come from now. And the word river, or actually the word pleasures, alternately translated as delight, is a derivative of the same Hebrew root word, which is of Eden. So we have that standard of delightfulness and pleasure. Paradise on earth is what it's going to be. To those who drink from the river. And the river of the new temple, now Jerusalem was distinct from virtually every major ancient city in that it did not have a river that ran through it, but in Ezekiel 47, 1 through 12, and in Revelation 22, 1 through 2, we read that the temple, the new temple, the future temple, the awaited temple, the eternal and heavenly temple, will have a river of righteousness that runs through it. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light. So he has two things that he is the source of. He is the source of life. He gave it. He is eternally alive. He was alive before the creation of time or motion or creation or anything else or any life having creature. They owe their life to the one who is eternally alive, who breathed the spirit of life in them, and they gave them reproductive capacities. And it is in his light that we see light. So light is the supernal attribute which dwells in divinity, but much more so than in ordinary terms. So he is the source of light. He spoke light into existence in Genesis 1:3, let there be light, and it was so. So he is the source originator of all light, and light is likened to luminosity or intelligence. By light, if we are walking in the light, we will be walking wisely and intelligently, and it is in his light that we see more of the same to guide us on the straight and narrow path, of which there are plenty of obstacles of, but through his light we will detect the obstacles and overcome them. Draw out your kindness to those who know you, and your righteousness to the upright in heart. So he's asking them not to extend it to the stranger. So this is not anti-evangelical. It's just that the crux of his matter is that expend the kindness that he's spoken of so often in so many ways, so many verses before, at least 3, to those who know them. To know Elohim is to not know about him. It's to know him as a person. He is a living, loving being who is a relational being in itself, who wants to exist. Our relationship to him ought to be defined in terms of experiential knowledge, or thought of in terms as a relatiousness. And the righteous, the upright of the heart, can be imparted or imputed, rather, his righteousness at the judgment. We have to be clothed in the righteousness of the Son in order to make it to the heavens, and that's why he died on the cross. He died to provide that righteousness for us, and clothed in his righteousness we are going to heaven, not because of our righteousness, but the righteousness of the Lamb of Elohim. Let not the foot of pride come against me, and the hand of the wicked drive me away. So prideful people are sinful and more generally wicked. These are facts and people. The fact of prideful and wicked people are a force we have to contend with, and one we do well not to ignore, because we ignore them at our own peril. And but through Yahweh's strength, we can overcome them and not be injured by them. So the hand of the wicked and the foot of the pride, these are implicitly violently used, given the nature of the characters of those whom they belong to, and drive me away, so against me. So it's all about what these evil, prideful, wicked doers and evildoers are doing, or can potentially do, not only to David, but to any of us. So this is a legitimate prayer for us. There the workers of wickedness have fallen. They have been overthrown and have been unable to rise. So the judgment is final and total. The workers of wickedness will be fallen, and that is cast into the lake of fire in that final day of judgment. They will be overthrown. They labor much time on earth to amass power, but the wealth and the power and all the accumulation of worldly prestige, they cannot bring with them to the grave, and they will be unable to rise in the resurrection. They will share Lucifer, whose servants they were, disembodied curse, so their soul will linger in eternal solitude in hell after their physical bodies are instantly evaporated in the lake of fire, whereas we who has enjoyed the resurrection, our spirits will linger in paradise before the ultimate day of the resurrection, when our bodies will be exalted and perfected. 1 John 3:2 says we have no idea what they are like, but we do know we have the ironclad guarantee and assurance that they will be perfected and designed to withstand the endurance of eternity, whereas the bodies we now have are designed to decay and perish in accordance to the laws of physics and the laws of nature, but the bodies which await us are something beyond spectacular. So I hope that's one of the reasons you're here. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to see you. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.